Hi. Now that we've understood how to get the 99th percentile in CAT overall, and hopefully you have an idea of what strategy you should go for, let's deep dive into the VARC section and understand how we can target the 99th percentile there. So let's first understand what are the marks that we need to get a 99th percentile. Now, when it comes to the VARC section, let's look at the last 3 years where we've had a 2-hour paper, which means that we have 40 minutes for each section. Now, if you look at it, we need a minimum of somewhere around 80th percentile. 80 to 85 percentile is usually the sectional cutoff which is set by institutes. Yes, there are institutes like IMA which have currently set the sectional percentiles at 70, but if you are targeting 80, most of the IIMs will come in that purview. Now, to get that minimum, depending on the year, we need to get somewhere around 20 marks, a little bit plus or minus based on whether the exam was a little easier or a little tougher. So if we look at CAT 2022, for instance, it was a little tougher. So you can see that the marks which were required to get this percentile, which essentially just means that you're scoring higher than or equal to 80 or 85% of the people who are taking the exam in the VARC section. So somewhere around 17 or 20 marks was sufficient for that last year, whereas earlier times it was a little bit higher. The marks were a little bit higher because the paper was also considered to be a tad easier, right? But broadly, 24 marks is nothing but 2 RCs. So probably somewhere around 2 RCs plus a few non-RC questions or 3 RCs with a reasonable accuracy is getting you over the sectional percentile. Now, of course, at this point, our aim is not to just clear the sectional percentile, it is to ace this section. So if you look at it, for us to get somewhere around a 95 percentile, we need a little more than 30 marks. So 33, 34, 35, somewhere around this, right? But if we are targeting a 99 percentile, there's a steep increase in the marks. We are looking at close to 40 or even a little more. So 39 marks, that's 13 questions, or 45 marks, that's 15 questions. Now in the VARC section, we're not going to get all 13 or all 15 questions correct. There's always some bit of subjectivity, a little bit of interpretation. There's no cut formulae that we can apply. We really need to understand the passage, and there'll always be a little bit of interpretation there. So instead of aiming at exactly 13 or 15 questions, probably what we are targeting is somewhere around 20 questions with a reasonably high accuracy, and that is what is getting you to the 99 percentile. Now that we've understood the marks that we are aiming for, let's look at the verbal section. What are the primary types of questions so that we can decide what we have to prepare? Now we have a total of 24 questions in verbal. This is something which has been there over the last couple of years. You'll also notice when we spoke about the marks versus percentile, the marks were a little higher in CAT 2020 because we actually had a couple more questions. But in 21 and 22, we've had 24 questions. Now these 24 questions have been split into 16 RC questions. So this has typically been 4 RCs with 4 questions each. So these 16 questions essentially are contributing 48 out of the total 72 marks that we have in the VRC section. Aside from this, we have 8 non-RC questions that split into 3 summary questions, 3 jumbled paragraph questions, and the newly brought in 2 sentence insertion questions instead of what we used to have earlier, which was the odd one out. This is something which was introduced in CAT 2022, and it could be that we have this in CAT 2023 as well. But while we of course need to prepare for these questions, we don't need to worry too much. Our primary focus has got to be the RCs, and a secondary corollary of that is the summary questions. If we just look at the RCs themselves, 16 out of 24 questions, so that's 2/3 of the VRC section, that's RC questions. And the total number of questions that we have these days is 66 questions. So almost 1/4 of the entire paper is actually the RC questions. So that means that if you're targeting a 99 percentile in the VRC section or even a 99 percentile overall, you have to prepare well for the RCs and you have to get a high score. Now, we're not going to get full 48 marks, but then if we have a high accuracy, we are getting 13 out of 16 questions or 14 out of 16 questions right, then that is really giving you a huge boost towards getting the 99th percentile. And it's also taking up a lot of the marks for the overall target, which we should be typically somewhere around 90 to 100 marks. Now, when we know that RCs are so important, what should we do? What is the preparation that we need so that we end up getting as much of those 48 marks as we can? Now, a lot of people start by solving RCs, whether it is, solving the past CAT RCs, other exams, or solving a lot of mocks, right? But that is just the smallest part of what you need to do. There's a lot of preparation that we should do along with solving RCs or even before solving RCs to put you in that right frame of mind and ensure that you are in the position that you can get as high a score as possible. Now, to understand what are these other things and why just solving RCs might not be sufficient unless you're already at a stage where you're scoring 30 plus marks in the VRC section, let's just analyze a little bit of the last 2 years and understand what we have had in CAT. Looking at the RCs in the last few years, one thing which has remained common is we've had a lot of RCs from overseas sources. So these could be overseas websites or even books which have been introduced of late. The thing which has been changing over the last few years is the difficulty of the RC. And one way in which this has been done is by increasing the difficulty of the genre or the topic of the RC itself. So we've consistently had one RC on science or tech. So it could be like, a tech RC. For instance, we had the BIOS and Technos RC last year when I took it, which was comparing tech, which is based on human biology or nature in general. We've also had RCs which have been on biology or on physics. So a lot have been there on genes, on evolution, on astronomy, things of this sort. We've also had RCs on psychology. So the Cuttlefish RC, which was there in 2021, for instance, that was a mix of biology as well as psychology because it was testing the marshmallow test and attempting to replicate that on fish. Along with that, another RC genre which has become more and more common is the socio-cultural genre. So sociology or the culture of today, that's something which has become quite popular. So for example, we could even have tech RCs, like, there's this RC in CAT 2022, which was around the social dimensions of tech or scientific testing. RCs such as the Orientalism RC, which was in CAT 2022, or another RC which was around how the Eastern people view making copies of works of art versus Western people. These would all fall in the socio-cultural genre. Another one which had come up in CAT 2021 included how leaders might potentially use fiction or use the power of telling stories, right? We'll also have probably one RC from the economics or business genre. So the marketing of tea, which was something in CAT 2021, could be a good example of these. Now, if you're not really sure which are these RCs that I'm referring to, we will put links in the description, or you could go on to mockat.com and then click on the lesson. We'll provide that as well. This will be a lesson which you could access just with a free registration, and you'll actually be able to read all these RCs and get a better understanding of what I'm saying. Now, in analyzing these genres, one thing which I realized was, along with these socio-cultural RCs, we are now having many more abstract RCs. So this could be RCs on philosophy. For instance, in CAT 2022, we actually had an RC which was on the philosophy of tech itself, right? So that is something where even in a tech RC, philosophy has been brought in. Or the RC on Orientalism. Again, that could be an example of philosophy. Philosophy of knowledge, an RC which was there in 2021 CAT. That again becomes a philosophy RC which was brought in. Along with this, we could also have other RCs based on politics. So, for instance, there was one which was around, where crime is more or less in the US, depending on different races. There can be RCs on history and geography. That has been something which was more common 1 or 2 years back. It's a little less now. And we could also have RCs on literature or art as well. So something like, the Utopian RC, which was there in 2021 CAT, or there have been RCs about, English grammar in 2020 CAT, language is disappearing. So all of these are examples of literature with a little bit of a tinge of socioculture again. Now you might be thinking together this adds up to more than 4 RCs. So what does this mean? Now probably what will happen is we might get one science RC, maybe a socio-cultural RC, a philosophical RC, and an economics, or similar, some mix of these. If you look at the last couple of years, these have been the genres, and the more abstract genres are the ones which are on the rise. And that is something which makes the VRC section a little tougher, because these are usually not genres or not topics which most of us are comfortable in reading. So that's the first thing which we need to prepare for. Now, the second thing, if you look at it, the RCs that we get in CAT, typically are of 4 different question types. Now, I'm not going in depth into these question types. If you're watching this on YouTube, you could actually log on to mockat.com and get a broader understanding of these question types. But suffice it to say that the 2 major types of questions which we have are direct or factual questions and inferential questions. Another one, which typically you will have maybe 1 or 2 questions totally in an entire slot, would be a meaning question, which means that we could be given something like a phrase or a sentence from the RC, and there'll be a question involved around the interpretation of that. It's not a vocabulary question that what is the meaning of, some difficult word. It's more an interpretation of what the author is trying to say in the passage. So by itself, even the meaning question would be similar to an inferential question. An inferential question is one where you need logical reasoning. Now, earlier what used to happen was we used to probably have about an equal number of direct and inferential questions. But if you look at the questions over the last 2 years, or even just CAT 2022 itself, the number of inferential questions are on the rise. We still continue to have direct multiple questions, but direct single or meaning questions, or direct single being of course the easiest ones, have been reduced. So this means that not only could the passages themselves be out of our comfort zone, the questions also involve more of logical reasoning. So we really need to understand the passage well and sort of use our logical reasoning muscles to solve these questions. So how do we go about doing this? So before you solve RCs, the first thing which you need to do is you need to become really comfortable in reading the different genres which are there. The more you read, look up any unknown concepts which are there that you don't understand, even look up unknown words to boost your vocabulary, the more likely you are to understand the RCs, read them faster, and just take in what the author is trying to say. Once you start doing this, the second thing to do is start practicing coming up with what is the author's view. This is especially common in analytical style of RCs where the author will definitely have a viewpoint. So how do we go about doing this? Now in the description, you'll have the link to our free Telegram channel. This will give you a daily reading article. So 6 days a week, you get a reading link, and that is what you should join and start reading immediately if you have not done it yet. This will improve your reading. It will get you to, being more comfortable in all the different genres which are there, because you will have CAT style articles, similar difficulty, similar sources, and that is what will make you comfortable. Of course, these are not going to be 500 word articles like what we have, because typically RCs are taken from articles which could be anywhere from 1000 to even 5000 words long, or even books which are of course much longer. So a 500 word article will not be at the same difficulty level as CAT most of the time. So you'll find that these are longer. So read as much as you can. If possible, try to get to the end. We've tried to keep it to a reasonable reading length so that you're able to do it on a daily basis. So please don't wait. Pause this video, click on the description in the link and start right away. Along with all of this, we'll also be solving a lot of RCs which will help you to boost your own accuracy, identify which are the RCs which are better for you, and ultimately get to the 99th percentile. So all the very best to you.